What's happening, everybody? I'm Steve, and welcome back to Junkdrummer TV. And I guess December is going to be Beatles December because I reviewed part one of the Get Back documentary, and a bunch of commenters, when I asked if I should do the next two, they said that I should, and I am here to serve. And I really wish I wouldn't have watched this documentary. As much as I loved part one, I thought it was insightful. I thought there was some educational things in there. I thought there were positive things to glean from that. As much as part one was great, I fucking hated part two, and here's why. If you watched my first review, you'll know that I was trepidatious going in to this documentary because I knew that this was during a very contentious time in the Beatles' history. You know, we're basically watching a band dissolve in front of our eyes, and I don't really have a taste for watching drama like that play out. Stuff that needs to be behind closed doors. We don't need to see how the sausage is made a lot of times. We just want to get the sausage, right? I want to just hear these wonderful songs from maybe the most important band that's ever lived. And everything that's great about part one, part two is just the same but bad. I hated this episode. It's everything that I hate about drama-filled, behind-the-scenes band director documentaries. So let's just get into it. So Peter Jackson did a great cliffhanger at the end of part one. George quits. George goes home. And I was thinking, oh, part two is probably going to be pretty bad. Sorry, you hear my dog walking by. Go. And if you've ever been in a band, you probably had PTSD from watching this go down, because I have never been, knock on wood, fired from a band, but I've definitely quit a bunch of bands, and I've fired a bunch of musicians over the years and all the different bands I've played in. And it's always awkward and shitty, and it's just not for public consumption. But we see that the only two people who are showing up now is Paul and Ringo. I guess they had a big meeting at Ringo's house, which was super swank. They kept showing this mansion that Ringo lived in. One of the things I really liked about it, this documentary, one of the very few things I liked about it, I really enjoyed watching them call him, or hearing them call him Rich and Richie, because, you know, his name's, you know, Richard Starkey. But we start out, and they're the only two showing up, Paul and Ringo. And the first couple scenes, it's very poignant. We're seeing Paul McCartney's face say to us, without saying anything, that he sees the end of the Beatles happening. There's this one scene where he's tearing up, man, and that sucks. I've been there. I've been in bands that, did some things and then dissolved and went away, and it's emotional. And those emotions aren't for us to see. That shit needed to be just there. You know, I read an interview, or well, it wasn't an interview, but an article where, Ringo hates this documentary, and I understand why. Poor Ringo, through this whole thing, is just a frayed wire. You can see him, too, having to watch the fall of this great empire, and he's not dealing with it well. So they have a little meeting, then they say John's going to show up in a little while, and then John and Paul go off to talk. So, John and Paul, that's, one and two of the Beatles, right? And then that thing happened, that thing that was not meant for us to hear. They went off to where they thought they were in private, and these fucking documentary makers hid a microphone. So we see a very candid conversation between these two brothers and friends and bandmates, and it wasn't meant for our ears. There were some things to get out of that. It seemed that Paul was becoming the tyrant that people say he was at that time. Man, the British press and the British tabloid press are fucking vultures. It's kind of a through line in this documentary of them reading these salacious articles about them. But man, there is one moment in that conversation where Paul owns up to his bullshit and admits what George and John have had troubles with, that he's done that he's probably been a little too tyrannical. And if you watch my first review, I said it felt like there needed to be an adult in the room, like someone that they all respected and would listen to come and kind of fix these breaks in this band. And Paul said that in that meeting where he said, Brian Epstein isn't here anymore. We don't have like a father figure. And that's what I said. It's what I got out of part 1. Everybody should have a friend like Paul McCartney, because he was willing to do anything that he could to keep this thing going. Paul really comes out looking really wonderfully during all of this. So some shit goes on, and then they finally get George back, which John never really seemed like he... Paul, I think Paul always thought, and John didn't, that George was going to come back, and he did. And this is when the documentary goes down in flames. We know for a fact that there are some street pharmaceuticals going on in this band. And before I go on this rant, to make sure I don't feel like a hypocrite, I've got to tell you, I'm 44 years old. I've been playing in bands since I was 17 years old. I've played 1,000 gigs all over this fucking country, and I am no angel. Please do not feel that I am trying to be puritanical when I talk about what I'm about to talk about, because I'm not an angel at all. But what happens for about an hour and a half is just drunk, drugged out lunacy and stupidity and just half-ass jamming and half-ass bullshit, out-of-tune guitars, bad singing, jacking off. And I'm not going to say that I've never done that. But if I did or didn't, I can tell you that if it was going on, me and my bandmates were doing that not for public consumption. And that is the thing I hated the most about this. Man, most bands have done just that. Imbibed too much. Indulged too much. And maybe try to do that whole mystical thing where, like, maybe if we can reach a certain mental exploration through outside materials that we put in our bodies, that maybe we can touch the sun. And man, sometimes it does happen. Maybe more than we want to admit. But that process isn't for us to watch. God, I hated this, man. I fucking hated it went on forever. God damn it. It was like Peter Jackson was like, well, we got to have a lot of walking in Lord of the Rings, because even the fucking trees walked in that movie. I guess we're going to have a bunch of fucking jacking off in this movie. It was fucking unsavory and just not worth your time. And another thing, because I'm a teacher and I have kids and students, I know that kids look up to the Beatles. And look, as adults, we need to be as honest with these kids as possible. But that scene, for me, maybe I'm getting fucking conservative in my old age. I don't think so. But I just don't think that we know that so many kids love the Beatles. I don't think we needed to have an hour and a half of drugged up, drunk Beatles for them to watch, and to maybe later on think they need to imitate that. Ugh. So shitty. Man, part 3 better be good. And the resolution of that fucking rooftop concert, it better be fucking awesome. I've seen a lot of clips from it, but I think they're going to show it in its entirety. And it better deliver. Part 1, really great. Like a great portrait and a love letter to the Beatles, even though there were contentious moments in part 1, there were things to glean from that. Part 2 is just gratuitous bullshit. But then a hero arises. And Billy Preston comes into our life to bring some clear-eyed clarity that these fucking 4 fucked up lads from Liverpool needed. And, they were having fun, but when Billy showed up, it got to joyful. And one thing that I did like about this episode was they talked about Nicky Hopkins a lot, which was the Rolling Stones piano player that was like always on the record, and they were talking about how they need a Nicky Hopkins. Quick aside, if you want to listen to one of the greatest rock and roll albums that's ever been recorded, Jammin' with Edward. It's a lot of the Rolling Stones with Ry Cooder playing with Nicky Hopkins. It's a phenomenal record. Billy Preston shows up. And they're like, hey, we've been talking about needing a keyboard player. And Billy Preston is one of the best keyboard players in the world. You know how good he is? He's the fucking electric keyboard player for fucking Ray Charles. And watching him be so happy to be there, because we know he's a fan, because they talk about like how he had met them in Hamburg in 1962 when he was playing with Little Richard. And he remembers how genius this unit is. And it took an outside member to get them to get their shit together. And man, bands are about chemistry. And sometimes adding a personality that changes the interaction between the other ones can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be bad. But in this sense, it really looks like it was a good thing. So Billy Preston, our hero of the day, coming in, and seems like his presence is going to move us into part 3, where we're going to get a little bit more precise concentration on what they're trying to accomplish from our heroes from Liverpool. So, I mean, I don't really want to talk too much about this thing. I got a few notes, like just from a technical standpoint. Once they go into the studio, if you've watched it, they give up on the place that they're at because it's not working. They need a change of venues. They actually go into their studio, and they put Ringo behind a wall, so that kind of sucks because then you'll never get to really see Ringo play at all anymore. And man, have you noticed, man, when those 4 guys are playing and working songs out, Ringo don't say a word. And it goes back to what I said in the first review of part 1. He read the room. He saw all of these annoyances going on between the members, and you could just tell he just chose to stay out of it. One thing, every band should needs a Mal. Mal just seems to be like their roadie overall guy that like just gets everything for them. In the 2, like with almost 6 hours I've watched, Mal has got them instruments, cigarettes or ciggies, bolo ties, and I think later on he holds off the police. Every band needs a fixer. It seems like Mal is a fixer. So I'm a really big fan of Mal. But yeah, I don't want to spend too much more time on part 2. I wouldn't let kids watch part 2 at all, because I don't think they need to see a heroined out John Lennon making jokes and acting a fucking fool. And I'm not saying that not like every great musician that we know, most have had those moments. We know that. I'm not trying to be puritanical here, and I'm not a fucking conservative by any means, but it's just distasteful. I don't think that John Lennon would want this to be out. I can't believe Paul and Ringo agreed to a lot of that. And the way that Peter Jackson cut that like hour and a half of just tomfoolery and falderall, he made it sound even more like drugs by editing with these quick edits and these weird camera angles and these conversations that would go in and out and run-on sentences and sentences that would just stop and different subjects just thrown around. Man, if you've been in that scene, you know what that sounds like. And that's what Peter Jackson went out of his way to make it sound like, even more than what it was. Shame on you, Peter Jackson, for part 2. Part 1, fucking A, man. Part 2, shame on you, man. That's it's about enough for part 2 for me. I'm going to watch part 3, and I'm going to do a review next week. And I really hope this thing starts moving uphill. I really hope this thing ends better than what part 2 is. Part 1, great. Part 2, no, not at all. So if y'all liked all that, please give me a like, comment, and share. I'm sure I pissed off some Beatles fans tonight, and I'm just always going to be honest with you all. It's the only thing that I know to be, and I try not to be a hypocrite because, again, no angel. But I would never let something documented that would put me in that light. Nope, never. And I don't think that John and George would have liked it either. So I'll see y'all next time. Keep practicing until it's easy.